Welcome to my channel. I'm Nairi, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be painting this super cute fairy using watercolor paint. It's part of a series, so if you want to check out my other watercolor tutorials, the link to them is in the description below. Also, if you want to paint along with me, you can access all of my designs free from my website. The link is also in the description below. So visit my website, download my designs for free, print them out, and you can paint along with me. And if you don't have watercolor paint, just print them out and use whatever you have. Coloured pencils, pens, they'll still make a beautiful gift for someone special. To help you navigate this tutorial, I've included timestamps in the description below, so you can just jump to whatever part of the video you need. And if I'm going too fast, just hit pause and take your time. So let's get started. I'm going to take you through the paints that I like to use, the colours I've selected, and some of the special colours that I've mixed, and I'll guide you step by step through the process of creating your very own beautiful greeting card. I think greeting cards are a great way to get into watercolor painting because they're fun, easy, quick projects which will allow you to learn and develop all of the skills in watercolor painting and still create beautiful pieces of art that you can give to someone. I hope you enjoy this tutorial. Okay, so today we're going to create this cute little fairy card. First thing I'm going to do is just talk you through the colors that are used in it. So the paints I like to use are the Schmincke Aqua Drop paints. And for this painting, 2, 4, 6, 8, there's 9 colours used. Let's just talk through them. Most of them are used straight from the bottle. The only 3 colours we're going to mix is the hair colour, the skin colour, and the green. So we've got lemon yellow, Indian yellow, magenta, amethyst violet, cyan blue, jade green. That's not that. That's ruby red, this is vermilion red, and brilliant orange. So those are the colours that we'll be using today. The green for the hearts is a mixture of jade green and the lemon yellow. So I'll just bring some lemon yellow over and we'll mix this up. I always use a test, it's a strip of offcut of the paper I'm actually painting on, and I use it just to test the colours I've mixed to see if I like them. It's really useful so that you're not trying out your colours on your actual artwork. I just made that a bit darker. Actually, no, I want it lighter. Also, you'll notice I have 2 bowls of water. One I use to wash my brush, the other I use to get clean water to dilute the paints. So I'm just adding more lemon yellow into the jade green because I'd like it a little bit brighter. Yep, and that looks pretty good to me, so wash my brush in that one. The other colour one of the other colours we want to mix up is the hair colour, and that's a combination of lemon yellow and Indian yellow. So just a bit of both of them, mix them together. It will need diluting a lot, so I'll just wash my brush and then get some more water over here. And let's just dilute it and have a look what it looks like. That's not too bad. Just trying to decide if I might add a little bit more Indian yellow. Actually, maybe a little bit more. And take a bit over there to dilute it. And again, it's really, really diluted. Looks pretty good to me. And the last colour that I'll be mixing for this piece is the skin colour. So this one's a Caucasian skin colour, and I use brilliant orange and vermilion red. I'm just looking at that. I might just put a touch more orange in there. Again, this will be diluted massively to get the actual skin colour, so I'll just put a little bit here and bring some water. It's the tiniest amount of paint, and then we'll just bring, actually that might be a bit too red, but let's have a look. Yeah, well, it's not diluted enough either, so let's dilute it a bit more. It's not too bad actually. I'm quite happy with that colour. It's actually slightly pink, so pinker than I want, so I'll just put a little bit more orange in. And bring that over there. Dilute it down. So just take your time to get the colours how you want them. The best thing to do is mix them up, have a test strip of paper, and just see how they look until you, and adjust them until you get them where you want. I think that's quite good. I'm quite happy with that. So there we go. That's the colours all mixed up. And now we can paint. I also use paper towels. So I use them when I wash my brush to dry it off. So seeing as we've just mixed the skin colour, why don't we go straight into it? So with the skin colour, I just put down a base layer. Now this has got no shading at all. I just put down the colour as a first coat. Next you want to work somewhere that isn't right next to these skin areas, because this paint's still drying, so you want it to dry completely before you work up next to it, otherwise the colours could run together. So just get a nice light blue. Base coat. So I'm just going to, again, it's just a base coat, so I'm not doing any shading. I've just got a really light cyan blue diluted, and I'm just going to put that on the whole hat area. And what I might do now is I'm going to dilute the hair colour quite a bit. I think I've got enough room. I might put a bit of water in there and take some across, just to get a look at that. Yeah, that brush isn't actually clean. Yeah. You can see some of the pigment in the colour, so I'm just going to try that again. Yeah, that's better. Right, so I want a bit more of that. Cool, that looks good. And because what I want to do is just do a really light kind of glow, I guess, around this circle. And then what I'm going to do is wet my brush and just soften around the edge. So basically I'm just wetting the brush, taking most of the water off, and then painting around the edge of that yellow. What that does is it allows the yellow to creep out further, and it will just soften the edge of it, so it's kind of got a glow. And the skin's dry now, so I'm going to come back with the same colour and add some shadows in. So for this I'm going to have the sun coming from this direction, so high, and that side, so the shadows will fall on this side. Okay, so now I'm going to wash my brush off and just dab it dry. Oh, not dry, but take most of the moisture off, and then I'm just going to soften the edges, and that just blends the colour a bit more gently, transitioning. So yeah, sorry, it blends it so you get a more gentle transition from the shadowed area to the lighter area. So just coming down here and coming down here. Okay, and again, let it dry. So we can put the little yellow bit in the centre of the flower. It's just a bit of the hair colour. And we can come back with some more of the cyan blue and start working on some of the shading in the hat. So it's dry now. So again, the light source is coming from here. So I want to shade the lower side, so I just put it darker along the lower side of it. Wash your brush, take off most of the moisture, and then just I like to soften it off a bit. You don't have to. If you don't, just do however you like to do it. There's this. I'm just showing you how I approach it because I quite like the really gradual colour transitions. And then again, I rinsed off my brush, took off most of the water, and then come back and just soften those edges, and then just leave it to dry. Just seeing this yellow is pretty dry. We need it to be completely dry if we're working over it. I'll quickly show you why. If you put down, just thinking something you're going to see easily, let's put down some of this. So if that's wet, I should put more water on it. So that's wet. So say you just painted that, it's still wet, and you come along and you're painting something right next door to it, and you go this and you paint it on. This is the watercolor will blend itself, so you'll lose your sharp edges and clean colors. So where you don't want that to happen, you really have to make sure that the layer's dry before you paint right next to it, or your colors can travel into each other like that. So this is feeling dry. So what I'm going to do here is just paint a bit of a random assortment, really. I'll show you. So I'll just test this colour. Yeah, it's good. So just choose every few that you would like to be the yellow. So I'm using the hair colour yellow. And I'm just going to randomly pick which hearts that I want to be that colour. And this is the brilliant orange. So that's the orange. Let's do magenta. And the blue. So this is the amethyst violet. So this is the green, that's a mix of the lemon yellow and the jade green. There's still a few little gaps. And I'd like my pinks a bit pinkier too, so I might just come back in with a bit more magenta on the pinks, and I might add a few more in. And some of these purples I'd like just to be a bit more bright as well. So I'm just coming back and just putting a bit more on. You're better off to go too light and come back and add more to get it how you want it than you are going too dark. It's much harder to try and take colour off with watercolour. So don't worry if you know the first layer that you put down isn't bright enough. You can just come straight back, and once it's dried, put another coat on. Just put too much water on then, so dry off my brush and then you can draw it back up the bristles of the brush when you touch back on. Again, I'm brightening up my blue a little bit more as well, so just putting a bit more on, then I've rinsed off my brush, dabbed it, and I'm just spreading the colour. Okay, so we've done all the hearts, and we'll go back to painting the fairy now. I must have got some yellow on my hand when I was painting around. It's made a mark there. I'm going to see if it'll come off, but it has actually dried, so it might not. We'll just get some clean water, rub it on, and then a paper towel. See if any of that colour lifts off. It won't matter too much because we'll be putting a darker colour in that. No, not really. In that place anyway, so it won't really matter, but I was just interested to have a look. Okay, what we're going to do now is it's a technique called wet on wet, and that's when I'll show you on a piece of paper. So what you do is you get your paintbrush with clean water, you wet the area that you want to paint, and what you can do is get a little bit of your paint, and the paint will travel wherever the water is. So it's a way of mixing colours and intentionally by having the paper wet. So wherever the water is, the colour will travel, and then you can just adjust it to how you want. So the wet on wet technique I use for the fairy wings. So what we're going to do first is get some clean water and apply it to the fairy wings. Now you do want to be careful about where you put the water, because wherever the water is, the paint will travel. So you want to, even though the water is invisible, you want to paint it on pretty accurately, so you don't end up end up with paint where you don't want it to be. So you put on the water. You don't want the water pooling, forming puddles on the paper, but you do want the paper wet. You can have a practice on test paper just to see. If the paper's too dry, the paint won't travel, and yeah, if it's too wet, it has actually similar issues. So the paint sort of puddles and doesn't really travel as well. And what I'm going to do is just touch on the magenta, and you'll see with the water that the paint travels. I'll rinse off my brush, and then I'm going to come down the bottom with the cyan blue, and then I like to influence how it looks a bit. So I just rinsed off my brush, dabbed off most of the water on a paper towel, and then come back and just soften up some of the edges if you don't like how the colour's transitioning. And actually I've gone a bit darker than I wanted to in that centre bit, so a paper towel, and you can just lift some of it off. Don't worry about how it looks now, it's a base coat, it won't matter too much, so we'll just let that dry, and I'll do the next bit down here as well. So we'll just wet on wet again, so paint the water on where you want paint to travel. We're going to drop on one of the colours that we want. So this is cyan blue. Rinse your brush off and coming back with the magenta down the bottom. So that's got more water on it than I actually want. I'm actually going to lift some of that off. That's not how I want it to go. And I'm going to come back again. So there was too much water on the paper then. And the paint was pooling and swirling. So I've taken off a bit of the water, come back, I've got a clean brush now. I'm just going to soften this off a bit. Clean my brush, take off most of the water, and then I'm just coming back in to soften some of these edges. Cool. And I'll just leave it like that for now. Again, it's a base coat, so we'll come back and do some more work on it. And we'll keep doing this for the other two wings. Actually, while that's drying, I'm going to come in and do another layer of shading on the face. So on the darker areas of the face, I'm just going to apply a bit more of the skin colour. Again, don't do it on the arms at the moment, because as you can see they touch up against the wings, so you don't want to accidentally end up with colours going where you don't want. So just do the face, and the legs are fine too, so I'm just coming down again, just adding more depth to that shadow. And just softening off the edges again by rinsing my brush, taking most of the water off on a paper towel, and then just going down that edge. What I might do next, I'm looking for areas which on the painting which aren't touching something wet, which is why I'm sort of pausing, trying to figure out what I'm going to paint next. So we'll just get a layer on this heart. That's the magenta. Can also put a bit of blue on these sleeves. So just adding a bit more magenta to the heart to make it slightly brighter. I actually still want a bit more shadow, so I'm going to come in again with the skin tone on the shaded area. Just put that on, rinse your brush off, dab off most of the water, and then just go gently up that edge. Rinse your brush, dab off most of the water, and then you just soften up that edge. And I'm going to do that in the face as well. Just going to bring in a darker tone. Rinse off the brush, dab off most of the water, and soften the edge if you've got. Rinse the brush again. You can do it multiple times. Rinse off the brush if you start picking up too much of the pigment. And there you go, just increase the shade from the highlights to the lowlights on the skin. Those bottom two wings I can do. So same techniques, wet on wet. I'm going to get my paintbrush, clean water, and I'm going to wet down over all of the paint. Then I'm going to come in with my colours. And as you can see, I'm just putting it along the edge. And then what I'm going to do is, again, wash my brush, dab off most of the water, and then just soften and blend some of this out to get a smoother transition. And also in the pink, you want to keep it wet while you're doing this. There we go. Now those are dry, so get some of the blue, that's a cyan blue, and just put a base coat on the shoes. We'll let that dry and then we'll come back and do some shading. Just bring in some more depth into the shadows of the hat. Just wetting my brush off and then getting most of the water off on the paper towel, and then come back and softening those shadows. I actually want, sorry, I didn't say this at the start, but another colour. Just pop it here. This is neutral grey, and I just want the tiniest amount to put a slight shadow down that side of the t-shirt. So I'm just going to go down this side of the t-shirt, under the neck. just apply a bit of a shadow. So I'm going to rinse my brush off, dab off most of the water, and then soften this edge. And I'm just doing that to show a bit of the shadow that you get from the light on the areas of the t-shirt which are white. Would also be under the face, around the neck would be slightly shaded too. Some on the skin there, so I'm just going to lift that off a bit. And lift that off a bit. Just let that dry. I'll come back down and do some more shading on these shoes. So just coming in with a cyan blue along the bottom where you expect to see a shadow. Wash the brush off, dab most of the water off, and then softening off that edge a little bit. I'm going to finish off these, actually, yeah, I'll do that side first. This is all dry, the skin's dry. Whoops, the wings are dry. So I'm just going to come in and wet them again, and we'll finish off the wet and wet on the top wings. We just did the bottom wings before, so we'll finish this off. Again, painting water over the whole wing. I've actually got too much water on there, so I might just let it soak in for a minute. Okay, I'm just going to touch some pink, or some magenta, just along that top edge. Rinse my brush and touch some of the cyan blue down the bottom. And then rinse my brush off, dab off most of the water, and then just come back and move the paint around how you wish. Now that tops and those shoes are dry. Watercolour paint dries so quickly, you don't usually have to wait very long, but okay, so just putting the shadow on the lower edge of the shoe, washing the brush, dabbing off most of the water, going back and just softening that edge off a little bit. Rinse my brush, dab it off, and soften that edge ever so slightly. Cool. Just wanted to put a bit more shadow in here, so I'm just putting a darker line down there of the cyan blue and darker line here. Then I'm going to rinse my brush, dab off most of the water, and come back and just soften that off a little bit. Now that's all dry now as well, so put some stripes on this top, so I'm literally just getting the cyan blue and adding some stripes. Now I haven't started on that pom-pom, so it's going to be magenta. Just make sure my hand's dry. It's kind of a bit brighter than I anticipated, so I just put some water on. You want your base coat to be light, because you can always get darker, and you want to add some good tonal values and tonal changes in it, so start light and then you can add your shading. I use ruby red to do the cheeks, but you want it really diluted. I'll just do a little test here, that's probably about right. So I'm just going to put a little pink cheek on. Out there and out there. Just let that dry. And come back with a cyan. Cyan blue. I'm just going to add a little bit darker to the side, because this is the shaded side. So just coming in with some magenta on the lower side. Rinse the brush off, take off most of the water, soften that edge. So I'm going to bring some magenta in on this skirt now. Just put a light base coat down of the magenta. Okay, everything around the hair is dry, so I'm going to come in, just going to get some of the hair colour nice and light, and we'll just get a base coat on the hair. Alright, so just coming in with a it's the same colour, it's just less diluted of the hair colour that we mixed, which was a combination of the lemon yellow and the Indian yellow. So I'm just coming in with a darker, which is actually just less diluted paint, and just popping in some shadows. I'm going to rinse my brush off, dab off most of the water, and then just soften them off a bit as well. And then coming back into the skirt. Again, rinse your brush, get off most of the water, and then what I'm going to do is I am softening the edges. So you feel like that hair's a little bit, got a little bit too much lemon yellow in, so I'm just going to add the tiniest bit of the Indian yellow and just come back in here. And just deepening the shadows in the kind of wrinkles of the skirt. And on the darker side of the skirt. Rinse your brush off, take off most of the water. And then again, just come back and soften them off slightly. And that's it. Hope you've enjoyed the tutorial.